Hello everyone. So, welcome to the August meeting of the Johnsonville Community Association public meetings. And I'm Tony Randall, and we're here in this wonderful Johnsonville Collective Community Hub on 33 Johnsonville Road. First of all, the key things are towards the back for you guys who are here in person. Welcome to everyone on YouTube, of course. And if there's an emergency, we need to go out the doors and collect in the car park next door. So we hold these in the middle Wednesday of each month, and next month will be another one. Johnsonville Community Association has its own proper meeting at the last Wednesday of the month, and you're welcome in the Johnsonville Community Centre to join us if you wish to do so. Tonight, we are really happy to have two interesting speeches here. The first one, which I find fascinating, is a community association member from Rodney. And Rodney's from Newlands Paparangi Association. Newlands is really notable because they have a smart strategic plan. They're organised. And as a community, their version of resilience is to get all the parts of their community engaged. And they do things like, as I'm sure they'll explain, they've got a strategic plan, they've got annual surveys, they really get a way of getting the community together. And Rodney has kindly agreed to come along and explain what they do. And if you're a community association or any association really, this is a way by which you can get your community act together. So. And then later on, we are also going to look at some cyber security and protecting your own device from
This is Nadia Yousef.
Yousef from Yousef. So Yousef has kindly come along. Nadia's kindly come along, and she's going to, a bit later on, talk to you about that. So, yes, so Rodney, please, tell us about what you're on about in Newlands and how you do it properly. And we'll, we'll go from there.
Great, thank you, Tony. Kia ora tātou, I whānau mai au ki Fiji, ki Newlands ahau nohu ana, ki Newlands Paparangi Progressive Association ahau mahi, ko Rodney tātou ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Rodney Barber, I'm the president of the Newlands Paparangi Progressive Association, and I'd like to talk to you about the Coordinated Community Enterprise we launched about a month ago. Next slide. Am I okay here? Yes, I can see myself on the screen. So what I'd like to talk to you quickly through is the purpose of the Newlands Paparangi Progressive Association. And then I really want to honour the work that has been done since about 2007 over the past 14 years, and then move on to the Newlands Resilience Group that I took what had been done, or parts of what had been done, and we launched the Coordinated Community Enterprise a couple of months ago. We have a vision statement of what it could look like in 2025, and then a little bit about next steps. So the purpose of the NPPA, as set out in the Constitution, is about improving services and facilities for residents, and also representing residents' views to decision makers, or the appropriate authorities. Thanks, Tony. This is a very brief summary of what's happened over the past 13 years, and I just want to spend 5 minutes on this to really honour what has been done. Back in 2007 was launched some disaster preparedness training at the local Newlands College. In 2008, there were actually some informal conversations between Granada, Johnsonville and Newlands about setting up the New Zealand Resilience Trust, which is now in limbo, but that's where it came from in 2008. In 2009, that trust did some research and talked to Wellington City Council about the vulnerability of Wellington. And the executive director of that New Zealand Resident Trust ended up attending some international conferences with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet and Wellington City Council on that. The great news is we've got him doing the evaluation of what we're doing now in November this year, which I'll come on to. In 2010, Tony mentioned that we kicked off the Great Newlands survey, my bad, and then published the Newlands strategy, 2011 to 2020. And that strategy had about 20 projects on it, and one of the highest priority projects was resilience. Where do we go from here on resilience? From 2011, I also want to acknowledge Nadia Yousef Paparangi and what they've done. They've done a lot of things, but the summary version is those 4 things. After the earthquake in Christchurch, they were asked to support the displaced. So a number of displaced Christchurch residents arrived in Newlands, and the marae supported them. They'd lost their homes and belongings, and they needed a safe place to stay with their children and elderly family members. So the marae opened its doors to these people, and they called in their community for assistance, whether it was food or clothing or other support. The marae also hosts the annual Neighbours Day with a particular focus on community awareness and preparedness in an emergency. They host the Newlands Welfare Centre emergency exercises, including some handheld radio training, which will be important in a disaster. And lastly, they host the annual Community Civil Defence Emergency Management event at the Community Centre, which includes CPR training, emergency displays, and information. I would also like to acknowledge that from 2011 to Purina o Te Awhakaranga, now the Tangata Whenua Group, Te Taupo Ruru, and I would like to briefly talk about what's happened since 2011. I'd also like to acknowledge Matua Joe McLeod, who's here tonight, from Nadia Yousef Paparangi, who's been involved since then, since 2011, in the Greater Wellington region. All Marae Collective got together with a range of local and central government agencies to service a Marae Emergency Resilience Group, which morphed from a collective to be named Te Purina o Te Awhangarangi. Every marae in the collective was asked to do 3 things. Firstly was to create an emergency preparedness plan for council, for distribute around the council networks. Secondly was agree to attend training sessions to acquire knowledge and certification for first aid training, introduction to REMO operations, radio and handheld radio handling procedures for emergency use, and run marae emergency resilience workshops, whananga and civil defence exercises. And thirdly was prepare a list of resources they needed for essential services, including water, storage of that, access to mobile electricity generation, Māori radio communication network, better access to government agencies to support marae communities, regular training with REMO, civil defence, better utilisation of Māori wardens into emergency resilience recovery planning, and then partnerships with other entities such as universities, the National Marae Iwi Leadership, Māori businesses, the Māori Land Court, New Zealand Maori Council, and Puni Corporate. And since the COVID-19 lockdown, so this is about March 2020, the Te Puranga o Te Awhakarangi group morphed back to the Tangata Whenua group, the Taupo Ruru, which Matua Joe McLeod now represents through REMO, the Greater Wellington Regional Council, and the Tangata Whenua arm for the Emergency Resilience Planning. So I thought that was really important to honour what's gone before, because we only carry what we've inherited, and hopefully some way, shape or form leaving it in better shape than with others than we received it. So next slide, just heading into the Newlands Resilience Group, was set up in 2019. We thought, one of the thoughts we had was disaster resilience is great, but community resilience is the first thing. So you're more likely to be more disaster resilient if the community is more resilient in the first place. And we thought, how do we do that? So we got all the leaders in the community together and asked that question. And the first thing we decided to do was a wellbeing resilience survey, which is actually based on the Treasury's living standards framework, which the government used to make wellbeing decisions. And thought and so we've done that. I'm going to show a video clip shortly, but I'll come back to what the components of that survey look like. But just very briefly, we defined community resilience is that a community is resilient if it has the resources, social capital, communication, and competence. And a community is disaster resilient if it is really able to respond and able to recover from a disaster. So a community is more likely to be disaster resilient if it's community resilient. And a community can be resilient if a holistic and sustainable approach is taken to the well-being of its people. And we reflected that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. So a resident, particularly a vulnerable one, whether they're vulnerable economically, socially, and or culturally, should be more confident if his or her community is more resilient. That was the outcome of the research we did. Could we just show the next clip, Tony? This clip was put together by Newlands intermediate students to explain the enterprise and some of the results of the survey and the importance of residents improving connections amongst residents. It's about 2 minutes long.
Sorry about that. And we technical issues. One of the results in the survey was there wasn't a lot of cross-cultural activity. So the principal of the intermediate school held an international food festival.
Newlands is an amazing suburb located in the northern suburbs of New Zealand's capital city, Wellington.
Newlands has a diverse population of around 14,000 people who come from different cultures and countries and speak many different languages.
Recently, there was a survey done that showed some people in Newlands feel disconnected from their friends, neighbours and community, which is why we have started a new project to help reconnect people in Newlands.
A well-connected community could help us get through tough times if anything bad happens.
A simple way to do this is to get to know our neighbours, because it's good to have a place to go or someone to talk to during challenging times, and vice versa.
The best way we can do this is to get to know each other and to make sure that we know where to go and who to ask for help or advice.
Waiho e te tui poto, koe e te tuiroa. Let us keep together and not far apart.
The Newlands Huia Community Enterprise is a group of volunteers who are working to make Newlands more resilient. There are volunteer Huia leaders who are working to make sure that the people who live in Newlands, Paparangi and Woodridge have the support and the resources they need when they need it. We're also making it easier for people who want to help to step up and make a difference. If you want to help or you need help, doesn't matter whether you're a person or an organisation, check out our website for more information.
And that piece of artwork there was done by the Newlands art teacher with the art students. So next clip, Tony. No, the next slide. So these are the components of the survey that we do. We've done a couple now, the last couple of years. We've got, we're thinking of doing another one this year and one more next year. And for each, and we've lined up the government wellbeing domains with the government resilience strategy areas. And so for each of those government wellbeing domains, there's a number of performance indicators with each of those domains, and those drive the questions in the survey. So by mid next year, we'll have 4 points of data over 4 years, so we'll be able to start to see the trends across each of those government wellbeing domains. And what we're currently thinking of doing is, once we've done the 4th survey next year, is actually have some community conversations about what that all means and what the relationships might be between the different wellbeing domains, and use some quite simple visual ways in which to show that data. And then when we're sort of all on the same page around what that all means, then get some ideas going on what the solutions could be to what those trends are telling us, and then work out which of those ideas we can implement in 2022, and which ones we'd want to offer up to other decision makers who make decisions that affect the lives of Newlands residents. So this whole coordinated community enterprise is enabling the residents to connect and build trust. A big part of that is the recruitment of the Huia leaders, which I'll come back to shortly, and enabling those residents to access the solutions to improve their wellbeing as identified from the wellbeing survey, and being able to speak with one voice into decision making. So in late 2020, we developed this, what we call a coordinated community enterprise. And that was really based on, we did some initial thinking of what the solutions could be to improve the residents' wellbeing. And then we thought, well, currently it's a provider-centric system. There's a lot of providers out there, whether they're government or community groups or residents, that could deliver different solutions at different times. Let's try and wrap some coordination around that. So the organisations on the right are the ones that we connected with back then, who helped us design the coordinated community enterprise and take it forward. One of the first things we did this year was recruited a leadership team of 12 of us now in the Newlands Resilience Group. And we have a diverse team of Māori, Indian, Chinese, Sri Lankan, Filipino, and some white Europeans. So a really quite exciting, diverse team. We launched the enterprise website in about 3 weeks ago, which those video clips are on, and there's more information on there about how Huia leaders can be involved. So there's 5 components to the enterprise, just to give you a little bit more detail. We have residents and their families managing their own wellbeing at the centre. And there's 4 components around there. One is a large number of different providers delivering different solutions at different times, which residents may or may not be aware of. There's Kaiawhina, who are helping residents and their families by helping them navigate to those solutions. We made a decision late last year that we would outsource the Kaiawhina function to the Citizens Advice Bureau. We've been really impressed with the breadth and depth of knowledge they have of the solutions that are available out there, which those residents who need the help may not know that the help is there. Top right, we have what we're calling Huia leaders, who are building trust and connections across the residents. And what we're hoping is that as residents become more connected and more trusting, that they will connect with those Huia leaders, and the Huia leaders, for those that need help, could take them to the Kaiawhina, the Citizens Advice Bureau, for help. But be a mate and go with them to Citizens Advice Bureau. And then the last component is the Newlands Paparangi Progressive Association, which has currently got the governance over this whole community enterprise. And they're also, we're working through how we lead that one voice. So from the results of the survey, how do we engage the residents to analyse those results, understand those results of the survey, get some solutions going about how we can improve wellbeing in Newlands, and how we want to influence decision-making, both in government and industry, moving forward. So what would success look in 2025? What we're hoping is we have a well-functioning enterprise working well, potentially being rolled out across other residents' associations, and I'll come back to that shortly. We have Huia leaders who are building connections and trust amongst residents, gathering them, connecting with them, and either encouraging those that can help into the community and or signposting those that need help, particularly to the Kaiawhina. They are known as having a heart for people, also having good boundaries so they do not get taken advantage of. They respect the views of others, regardless of race, age, gender, orientation. They have an intense desire to serve their community, particularly in times of need, with a willingness to share their knowledge and experience with other Huia leaders from other ethnicities. The Huia network with better access to government agencies to support them. The leaders are up to date. The Huia leaders are up to date with their training and professional supervision. So we've wrapped a whole lot of training around the Huia leaders, and we're also developing a professional supervision framework where they can connect and share cross-cultural experiences as they engage across the community. We're also hoping that residents are reaching out to a Huia leader. Residents who want to help are either connecting with a Huia leader or using our website to apply for other volunteer roles, whether it's through those other branded names like Citizens Advice Bureau or Volunteer Wellington, etc. Local community organisations who need volunteers are using the website to actually recruit the volunteers they need from Newlands. And we have an up-to-date system of all those who can respond in a disaster to meet all the different types of need in a disaster, which I'll come on to shortly and show you how we're thinking of that working. And we're enabling residents to speak with one voice into decision-making, using the wellbeing data as a base, together with community conversations and with the enabling technology. So the result of the process is a clear representation of the suburb's voice into decision-making. And lastly, our suburb is known for its residents who do 5 things. One is find fulfillment in community relationships rather than simply in consumption and leisure. Secondly is understand your role within society rather than being a collection of individuals. Thirdly, are free to help others rather than wanting freedom from others. Fourthly, value competition and cooperation. And lastly, focus on well-being rather than simply material wealth. So the next steps over the next few months is to recruit some Huia leaders. So if we can go into that clip, Tony, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Adia is a new student in our class who recently moved to Newlands with her parents and baby brother. Adia often gets sick. We think it's because they live in a rental that is cold and damp. Sometimes Adia comes to school without lunch, so I share some of mine with her. I told my mum and dad that sometimes Adia doesn't have food, so they said that they will pack an extra lunch each day that I can share with her. And I told my parents that sometimes Adia is sick because she doesn't live at a nice home. My mum works as a property manager and is looking for a better home they can move into. We wrote to the marae who often help the community, and they started checking in with Adia's family and delivering food parcels. A local Huia leader was also in touch with Adia's parents and linked them up with services that could help them, as they didn't know who could help. Now Adia comes to school a lot happier. Her family have moved into a warmer home and her dad is working during the day. We are really proud that we could help Adia and her family. It's easy to do, and we encourage you to do it too.
E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi. He toa takitini. My strength is not as an individual, but as a collective. For more information about the Huia Community Enterprise and the work we're trying to do to connect people across Newlands, Woodridge and Paparangi, check out our website.
So I mentioned before that over the next few months we want to recruit, or we're keen to recruit the Huia leaders. The reason we picked Huia leader was it was somewhat connected to the Puki Huia Park, which has just been upgraded in Newlands. Huia leaders will be interviewed and police checked and go through a full day's training, and they'll be part of a monthly professional supervision framework for their benefit. We are also going to start identifying those who can respond in a disaster and assess our capability to do so, which I'll briefly talk about in the next slide. Then we're going to start reaching out to other community groups and invite them into the enterprise so they can better connect directly with residents. And then, as I mentioned before, for next year, start thinking about how we engage the community in conversations around the wellbeing data so we can speak into decision making. The whole enterprise is going to get reviewed in November this year, and will each November of each year. And we're currently thinking of offering this enterprise to any other residents association in the country under what we're calling a bespoke copyright license. There's a little bit of adaptation, and we would give them everything that we've got free, so long as they agree to an annual evaluation each November. And there's a couple of conditions on the website, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible for other residents associations to adopt this. And we're looking to open that up probably about April next year, but we really want to have something that's somewhat operating this year, that's been evaluated by that chap I mentioned earlier, who's been involved since 2007. So next slide, just to show you how we're thinking about disaster response and our capability to do so. You'll see on the right-hand side all the different types of needs there are in a disaster. We've made the assumption that we could be 2 to 4 weeks without help in Newlands, given there'll be highly likely to be other priority areas elsewhere in Wellington. We're looking at a central hub and then 4 satellite hubs, and then the idea of a transition satellite for those who will be heading north from Wellington on their way back home to Porirua and other suburbs north. These are the Huia leaders here. So as we build those connections, they will know need really, really quickly in their networks, whether that's their local street network or whether it's they're leading a network that goes across Newlands that's theme-based, or it could be a religious organisation or a sports club. And then what we want to do is find leaders who will help us assess whether in fact we've got the capability to meet all the needs of residents over 2 to 4 weeks across all those dimensions. And then the radio comms we need, that if there is a disaster, the Hui leader knows the need very quickly. That could either be met in a satellite hub, where there's a first aider in there, or if there's no help here, it comes into central hub comms here, and they've got a complete list of everyone who's available, and they can prioritise quickly to make sure those needs are met, so that we can focus most of our effort on helping others in the transition satellite as people head north to north of Johnsonville and Newlands. And that's it. I hope that gave you a sense that there's a real community heart behind this and quite a big aspirational vision, but we're taking sensible, slow steps to achieve that. And the most important thing we've got now is to find these Hui leaders, because that's going to succeed or not based on Hui leaders coming forward and wanting to help us lead improving connections and trust across the suburb. So Tony, I'm happy to take questions.
So first of all, thank you very much. And as a member of a residents association, we look on with envy at Newlands. There's a couple of key takeaways I just want to highlight. First of all, it's hard to get organised when you're a community, relatively little group of volunteers, and it's especially hard to come up with a plan. And I think one of the reason why it's important that you come and tell us what's happening is because you've got a structure to do a plan. And I think that when communities want to go beyond just being a reactive meeting group and try and become proactive and try in terms of making the community work, getting a framework that helps you do a plan is a huge leap forward, because it seems really hard if you're doing it by yourself. So that's where you guys have already done the hard work, and really appreciate the opportunity for those who are interested to go to the next level, if you like, to do that. The other thing is just more of a simpler thing, which is I didn't really think about us being a transition area, but if there's a big adverse effect in Wellington, of course we're always thinking of the big one in terms of an earthquake. Of course, it's not just about up here in North Wellington looking after ourselves. Okay. It's actually about looking after those that are going to need to get out of Wellington, even if it's so. Hopefully, for a smaller event, it'll be more about people going home to Paparangi and such like. For a big event, it could actually be helping be a transition area for an evacuation. So any planning that's done will help make that work. So at that point, has anyone got any other questions here?
You talked about surveying your community. How do you do that? What do you do, by email, leaflet drops, what?
So we've done it twice now. The most effective, I'll tell you a little, put it in context. Back in 2019, we connected with probably about 40 leaders in about 3 workshops. And at the first workshop, one leader, I won't mention who it was, one leader said, Rodney, this vision is aspirational, is ambitious. And I said, yes, it is ambitious with you. It's impossible without you. And then another leader said, I'd rather be part of something ambitious. And then another leader, who I'll also who that was the principal of the Newlands primary school, said, Rodney, I can feel the aroa in this room. And then Angela Lowe, the principal of the intermediate students, said, right, I'm going to give you my intermediate students to go and do the survey at home. So she printed out, I think it was 450 A5 versions of the survey. And Lena Mendes, who's the deputy principal, who's also the chairperson of the marae, she put the survey questions into we wanted to make sure the survey questions were statistically sound, but she put them into easy to understand language. And then the intermediate students took them home, and we got about 333, I think, or about 300, which took us days to input, into the, And then we talked to New World and to one of the senior citizens group to make sure we had the age scope covered off as well. We've done it online before, which is far easier for us, but not everyone has easy access to technology. So I think when we did that, we got about like 120. So we're really thinking, how can we do this efficiently and effectively to get about, we need about 330 surveys to be statistically sound or whatever the right, significant, thank you. So we're still working on how we do that in September-ish. Yeah, so.
Yeah, you know, again, it's not just the framework. So you've got examples, and if someone wants to do a survey, you've done it a couple of times, so you can give them some advice, but you can also say, well, these are the questions we asked. And that framework earlier on, where you've actually broken down the elements of the sort of things that the community resilience should cover, also helps tailor and get the particular bits of questions lined up. But no, I'm not sure if I can.
One of the biggest surprises I got in the results of the survey was most people felt a sense of belonging in their ethnicity, their culture, their religion. But there was very low cultural integration or interaction. And I'm pretty sure that's what sparked Angela to do the International Food Festival. And from memory, there is one age group that was somewhat discriminated against. And so it got us thinking, well, is there some kind of relationship between those two components? And we're really looking forward to these community conversations next year, where we can start to talk about some of what the data is telling us between each of those different types of domains.
How do you propose to find your career leaders?
Great question. So we're doing 5 things. One is we've put posters up on Newlands shops windows. Secondly, we will have big A3 posters on buses, 20 Newlands buses from later this month for about 5 weeks. Thirdly, we're on radio for the next month, 4 or 5 weeks. Fourthly, I'm connected into about 50 leaders in Newlands and asking them to help us recruit these leaders in their networks, whether that's shoulder tapping or suggesting they contact me, and through social media, so Facebook and Neighbourly and those kind of mechanisms. So we're trying to be smart about it, but not overdo it, because as Tony said, I've only got 12 on team, and we've all agreed we're only doing 3 hours a week on this. So we're very, very smart about what we put our energy into, because I don't want to burn the 12 out, because if the 12 left, I'd be up the proverbial creek.
Yeah, well, it's important that it's aspirational, but it's achievable. I mean, ambitious, but achievable. And so you have achieved stuff, and we can see that. I also think, so in terms of the community groups, there is an astounding amount of groups who get together. You know, you've mentioned citizens' advice, but there's, you know, everything from groups like Lions, Rotary, there's a lot of cultural groups, there's a Mariah, of course, and there's a whole spin-off of different groups around that side of things. And even, you know, schools, of course. There's a lot of community groups that are willing and able to step forward a little bit, you know, like an hour a month or 2 hours a month, or maybe one-off little project. And the key is to tie them together, to be a catalyst, if you will, and give them a framework by which they can work together and do more than what they can do individually, which I guess is the whole point of the exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So any other questions? I think we can also do questions on YouTube too, if anyone wants to post something. No, nothing. Yeah, right.
How do you guys work with RAN? Do you have meetings with them at all?
With who?
The Wellington Residents Associations network. Because I've had several. Sorry, I'm Ray Chung. I'm with the Oslo Residents Association.
Okay.
And we have several meetings with them just to compare the different residents associations in Wellington.
Yeah.
And I've actually never seen you guys there.
No, well, we've sort of been head down the last 2.5 years
Yeah.
putting this in place, and haven't wanted to get out too quickly to talk about it until we had something to talk about.
Yeah.
And now is probably the earliest we'd want to do that because we haven't actually got this running yet. But when Tony asked me, I thought, well, it might be 6 months earlier than what we'd otherwise want to, but I can't say no to just airing what we're thinking of doing. So, but no, we haven't reached out.
I'm very impressed with your plan and how you've sort of broken it down. I mean, we've done the same thing in Onslow, but we don't have anywhere near the amount of detail that you have here. So I think that it would be good, as you were saying, that if you can share it amongst other associations.
Yeah, so on the website it says if other residents associations are keen to start talking this year to look at possibly adopting whatever version 2022 looks like after the evaluation in November this year, then we just need to engage with the president and have a quick chat, and then we can come out and chat. There's a lot more beneath this, which you just can't do justice in like 20 minutes. Yeah. Yes.
I'm curious about how many people you have on your committee or the organisation that's actually putting all this together. Like, what did you start with to begin this process, and how many individuals has it taken to draw in all the facets?
Great question. Gosh, short answer, Rodney. So my wife suggested to me 2.5 years ago to go into a local event, and I went down and I thought, oh my gosh, the potential here is incredible to build on. And I just started connecting with others, like the chap I mentioned before, who kicked off the Newlands Trust, the New Zealand Resilience Trust, and others, and got in touch with the NPPA and worked with them, and then connected with Citizens Advice, all the leaders of the community. And I had no idea that we'd be where we are now 2.5 years ago. I mean, it's just amazing when I think back. But in answer, I mean, I've done a huge amount of work over the past 2.5 years on this, and my leadership team of 12 has only been in place since February this year. So yeah, but it's been great to have Natura Joe to talk to, who's here in the room, and others I've depended on and connected with to really get my head around this. But it's really been a team effort across 50 leaders across Newlands. And now with my team of 12 and the Newlands Resilience Group, which is part of the NPPA, it's impossible without them. And then on the Newlands Paparangi Progressive Association, we have about another 10 who I report to from a Newlands Resilience Group perspective, but I'm also the president at the moment. So does that help? Yes,
it does. I mean, did you find you had buy-in, like initially? Did it take some?
Well, what helped me a lot was when I answered your question about the leaders' workshops in about July 2019, so it's 2 years ago now, when the primary school principal said, Rodney, I can feel the aroa in this room, which is the whole point, we need to love our communities. And then Angela, I'm pretty sure she thumped the table, and Lena, the chairperson of Marae, was beside her. Now, I'll give you 400 intermediate students to do the survey. I thought, right, we've got, what's the word? Something happening here where someone's recognised it's ambitious, someone says they want to be part of something ambitious, someone says they can feel the aroa in the room, and someone says, right, I'll give you 400 intermediate students. I thought, wow, that is like cool. And so we just kept progressively developing what we've ended up launching. But yeah, it's been hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is, so a couple of things. First of all, picked up from previous work at Newlands Paparangi, who had a really strong strategic framework and engagement. And in fact, the Johnsonville Community Association used it, and we did develop a 10-year strategic plan using the same approach, doing a big group survey and coming up with goals and projects. We got the plan, but didn't necessarily execute it. It's now time for us to review it, and this is very timely for us to go and really look at getting some more go forward on that. It does take some leadership, but I think it also, what you've found is that there are people who are looking for a lead. There are people who want to step forward, but they can't see the path to say, well, how to be effective. And as you said, it just takes a couple of groups where the timing is right, like you found with the Newlands intermediate principle, to say, okay, I'll contribute this. And then you can say, well, that will hit that goal. And then we can go and look at the next goal and the next goal. It's good. And getting some momentum around that. It does take a small group, I think, for people to need to step forward and do the work at the beginning. But the opportunity here is that you don't necessarily, you have to do the work, but you can get a framework now. And the other thing is that having a framework will probably make that work more likely to be successful and probably more likely to be effective. Yeah, so I think that's the value. Yes?
Not a question, just a reflection really. I come from the perspective of having been in the Christchurch earthquakes and what you've really achieved here. Sorry. So just reflection really. I come from the perspective of having been in the Christchurch earthquakes, and what you've done here is you've taken something that at the time was incredibly complex in terms of what we were going through and what needed to be done, and you've simplified it beautifully in a way that everyone here can understand, and I'm sure everybody out there in cyberspace can as well. So, you know, well done, you guys. It's a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, so I'd just like you to thank Rodney and his team. And yeah, it's really good that you've been able to come and show us what you've achieved so far. I know it's a little bit early, but it was too good to let go. And when you mentioned that you might want to talk about it, I grabbed you. Yeah. And so you need to come and visit with us. But I think also with the other residence groups, maybe you might want to set a goal of saying, well, if people are going to get engaged, maybe sometime in October, just have a forum, and those that want to step forward and get more of an insight and more go forward, you can come and convene it and we'll get some real stuff done.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rodney. So now we're just going to do a bit of a switch over because our second speaker has also got a very important topic for resiliency, and it's much more not getting done electronically resiliency, if you want to put it that way. So I'll let Nadia introduce herself and what exactly she's going to cover, but we're just going to do some plugging and unplugging at the moment. And also want to thank Darren for his technical expertise in solving these problems. I thought I knew a little bit about how things work, but not quite as much as I thought. Yes. So also want to do this great facility, and you can see some of the parts to all of this. You know, overhead projectors and all that, and screens, and this lovely room here, warm toilets and everything. The Johnsonville Collective Community Hub is on Johnsonville Road, and if you are a community organisation, you want a place to meet. It doesn't have to be a big forum. They've got meeting rooms, so even if it's just an executive meeting that you want to think about doing, then you should contact Tracy at the Johnsonville Collective Community Hub on Johnsonville Road. It's a good place, to come and have a meeting. You don't have to be from Johnsonville. You can be from Church Park. We've had people come from as far away as Miramar to meetings here. So this is great. So I'd like to, now that you've got to come over here.
Take Rodney's.
Oh, yes.
And
you want a mouse? You can
it's okay, I can just stand over here.
Okay, just want to step into shot and introduce yourself and just give us a brief rundown of what we're going to cover, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. So my name is Nadia Yousef and I'm the Manager of Incident Response at CERT New Zealand with a computer emergency response team. and today I'm here to talk to you about some general things that you can do to make yourself maybe more secure online. Yep.
Mouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It's an irony in technology going wrong when I'm representing the emergency response team. So that's good. So New Zealand, what are we? The Computer Emergency Response Team. We were set up a few years ago to provide cybersecurity advice and information for all New Zealanders. We work for absolutely anyone that uses the internet and wants to speak to us. So home users, organisations, small to medium enterprise, big industry, government, everyone in between. Which means that for us and our little team, no 2 days ever look the same. And we're part of a global effort to improve cybersecurity. So while the name CERT doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, we have it because we're one of 100 internationally. Lots of different countries have CERTs, and we all do really similar things in helping people stay secure online. New Zealand is a little bit different in that we work for all New Zealanders, big organisations and individuals. Some kind of divvy it up a little bit, but seems to work for us. And of course, we work across the cybersecurity ecosystem. So there are other organisations in the space as well. Of course, some more recognisable, the New Zealand Police, NetSafe, Department of Internal Affairs, the National Cybersecurity Centre. And this diagram actually misses a few other agencies that we work with, like the Office of the Privacy Commissioner quite regularly as well. But what we do, well, I mean, we all work within a kilometre of each other physically on Lambton Quay, and we all make sure that any of us can take reports from anyone that wants to report them, and we just make sure that they end up with the right agency. So it doesn't actually really matter if you go to police with an issue, they will help you get it to us if we're the best place to help you, kind of a no wrong door policy so that you don't get passed around agencies. So our core functions are identifying threats and issues, vulnerabilities, dealing with incident reports, so when people tell us that things have gone wrong, response coordination, helping people get back on their feet when things have gone wrong, and readiness support, which I think is a nice way of saying advice. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, very specifically, was a couple of simple steps that you can take to stay more secure online. We have all been told 1,000 times that we need better passwords, and it's easy to roll your eyes and think, well, my one's fine. But what we see in the reports that we get through to us regularly is just massive financial loss and massive information loss because things like passwords weren't strong enough and multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about in a minute, wasn't set up. So for Q1 this year, we had $3 million worth of financial loss from New Zealanders reported to us, and we know that that is just the tip of the iceberg. Those reports come through from what we see the most is people get phished, or they'll receive spam emails, they'll go through the steps on those emails, they'll maybe pay the money or share their banking details or something like that. And then afterwards, they'll realize that something was wrong. And depending on how quickly you work that out, you can have varying results in getting the money back. So what we're encouraging people to do is have unique passwords. Just keep them different for each of your accounts. It's very dangerous having one password for everything, because if anyone ever works it out, then they have access to everything. It can be very tricky, of course, or impossible to remember your long, strong, complex, unique passwords for all of your accounts. So what we recommend people do is use a password manager. If they're interested in that, you can download software which will store all of your passwords, and you only have to remember one.
How do you know we're downloading the right one?
That can be hard, and what we would recommend is when you go onto the Google store or anything, just look for the top 5. Anything that is well used and widely used is usually pretty safe. And sometimes that's tricky and complicated as well. And so even writing them down on a notebook and just keeping it away from your computer at home is better than having the same one password for everything. That's not ideal. Password managers will always be better, but still just having them in a notebook in a different room to where you keep your computer is pretty reliably safe. We use a couple of different password managers at my work. They give us the option. And again, all we did was have a look at the most commonly used and well-reviewed ones, things like dash lane and key pass are pretty good and user friendly. And turning on two-factor authentication. It is a slightly annoying thing to have. We all know that. So two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is something else that you use as well as a password. So maybe it's when you go to do online banking, they ask you for a password, but they might also ask you for a PIN number as well, or they might ask you to have a physical token or something like that. It can, sometimes it's just a fingerprint with your phone. So it is getting more accessible and more simple to use, and it can be quite annoying. But what we have found at CERT is that for all of the many incidents that are reported to us, most of them wouldn't have happened if people had multi-factor authentication in the first instance. The past quarter, the one from the beginning of the year, we had just shy of 2,000 incidents reported to us, and the bulk of them would have been missed with two-factor authentication set up. So I will never stop talking about how important this one is. And we have a lot of advice on our website, specific guides on how to set it up on different apps. You know, you can do it on Facebook and your banking and your email, even if it's just the main apps that you use every day, that's really important. Updating your apps as well. So when you look at your phone and your computer and it says, you know, it's time for an update, install now, and then you get the option of just saying later and making it wait for a week or a bunch of days, we would just encourage people to press OK immediately. It's so important. When companies roll those out, there is a reason, there is a problem with the software and they want to fix it. It will keep you secure. Sometimes it does change how things look on your screens, and we understand that that is very annoying, but it's so important to have patched and up-to-date software. It will stop attackers being able to get into your phone or your laptop or whatever device you're using. And check your privacy settings. Excuse me, I'm talking a lot today. That is something that we tend to recommend for audiences that have Facebook profiles and things like that. So it's always good to know what sort of information that you're putting out there. And if you have a Facebook page or, you know, an account like that where you're sharing photos of your family or information about what you've been doing, it's really good to make sure that your privacy settings are done in such a way that only people you know can see them. Sometimes having information about your dog's name and the street that you live in can help someone guess your password. So just making sure that those photos and those messages are only going to the people that you want to see them is really important, and can help you stay more secure and maintain a bit of privacy online as well, of course. And tell us if you have any problems, if you have any questions. You can report it to us. You can contact us on 0800 CERT-NZ. We're in the office, we're about a team of 30 something, and we've got a call centre as well that are set up to just help talk through incidents or issues or questions. We've got a wealth of information on our site, and we're available Monday to Friday. It says 7 till 7, but I hope we take quite a few calls outside of those times as well. So yes, I've raced through a little bit, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yes. So thanks for that. I mean, getting this, and everyone's so reliant on these electronic devices too, and you reminded me of some things I'm not doing right. Yes. So, any questions? Yeah, Warren.
From your experience, what bank account system from the various banks do you regard as the best in terms of a two-factor authorisation framework?
They are all much of a muchness in my experience, to be honest, and I think they're all owned by a very small amount of bigger companies that enforce the rollout. What we have found is banks are generally great. They don't want you to lose money. They don't want attackers to get in and do this. So we've found that they've been really good. And something we deal with quite a lot is, someone will pay money to a scammer or something, and then they'll realize, afterwards that they've done it. And if they contact us or the bank or the police within somewhere between 48 and 72 hours, quite often we can turn the money around so we can get it returned to them. And we've had amazing experiences with the banks really prioritising doing that as much as they possibly can. A lot of the time when people report things to us, they are a little bit light on detail with what they share because they're a bit embarrassed or, you know, they're a bit uncomfortable. But actually someone in my family, my sort of distant auntie, recently lost $20,000 to one of these scams. So I got to see the process all the way through. In one bank, she moved on fast enough and got 10,000 returned, and the other one wasn't. It took her longer to notice. But it was really interesting to see kind of the whole process start to finish and the very human elements of realizing that something's gone wrong and making a mistake and getting around to reporting it and sharing that information. But if you do it quickly, then sometimes it's not such a big crisis.
So your conclusion is that there isn't really much difference between the banks?
I don't believe so. Not the main ones, at least. I'm not. I haven't personally found any real difference with them.
Well, I certainly have. I think everything's got a very clear two-step login. And Rabobank's got, you know, a card reader thing.
Yeah, the little token thing.
Well, yeah, goes well.
I mean, I know there's, I mean, certain rules, but certainly when you talk about different passwords, but certainly one of the things that I've made sure is make sure my bank password is different to all my other passwords, and just like your main email. So the other thing which I've come across with a wee bit in IT, your email password is also really important, because sometimes some of the scammers, what they do is they get your email password and then they go on a website and they say, I need to reset the password. And of course, a lot of password resets send an email to your email and you click on the link. Now, of course, if they can get into your email, they can actually reset your password on another website. And so, I mean, some passwords are more important than others. Certainly the password that protects your money, because often that's what they're after, is important. But also the password that protects your password, which is often your email, is also important. And of course, the two-factor authentication thing is different banks are different, but certainly I know the bank I do, if I've got any significant transactions, they two-factor authenticator, which gives me some assurance. Yeah, so that's cool. So we've got any other questions? Yeah.
Nadia, you said that there was, I think it was the first quarter was 300 million?
3 million.
3
for us,
million in loss in just one quarter. Is that an increase? Are you seeing an increase in the number of scams and the amount of money or the ways that people are being scammed? Is that changing, increasing?
It's really interesting. The number of reports we get is just exponentially rising every quarter. The financial loss tends to stay pretty static. So there's a whole lot of different influences that could be. But what we think is that people are more aware of near misses and they're telling us, and they might be catching it sooner and reporting it to us and sharing it with us. One of the demographics that we've pulled stats on quite a bit and been quite interested in is the over 65s group. And when we started 4 or 5 years ago, we had quite a few reports from this specific group, and it was quite high financial loss. And over the years, we've seen the reports from that group continue to increase, but the financial loss decrease. So I think it's a bit of recognizing that maybe something's a bit fishy and sharing it with us as well. So that's, I think, quite positive.
Yes, it's quite interesting because you're talking about privacy. You know, I mean, if you go on Google, unless you actually action Google and say, I want to keep your privacy, but if you want to Google something and suddenly you get bombarded by all these other companies for one thing that you may be looking at, they want to sell you the same thing. And that's not only on that, YouTube, they're all monitoring you.
Yeah, it's so creepy. And the thing is, if you try and use those websites without being logged in, if you try and use YouTube and Google and those things without having an account logged in, it's a really different experience. It's quite difficult as well. So it is certainly one of the trade-offs that I think we have to make when we're using those sites. So something that the people that I work with quite a lot recommend is ad blockers. That I actually don't use them, but a lot of people say that it kind of makes their online experience much less creepy in that sense as well. So.
Yes, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really, really good, sensible advice. Really good to remind us about doing the basics well. Often that's what it's about. And also, I guess, it gives them advice. So if someone wants to know a bit more, they go on your website.
CERT.govt.nz. There's lots of information on there. You can give us a call. You'll get me or the team. So, yeah, happy to help. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so thank you very much. Could you please thank and thanks to you for coming out. It's been nice, another nice meeting in August, and the second Wednesday of September we're going to have another public meeting with the agenda yet to be set. Yeah, if anyone out there is interested, please get involved with your residents association. Certainly people who are interested in the Newlands one. So when does the Newlands Paparangi Association meet?
The first Tuesday of each month.
So the first Tuesday of each month, if you're in Newlands, you meet where?
Community Centre.
At the Community Centre. So the Newlands Community Centre, the first Tuesday of each month, if you're in Newlands, you want to go and join the NPPA, they're pretty effective. Onslow is in... Oh.
We're actually meet up. Sorry, the Onslow Residents Association, we cover Kandala, Broadmeadows and Kaiwara, and we actually meet on the second Wednesday of every month, which is the same as when Johnsonville has their presentations. So
Anyway, okay. So join us rather than during the day. After that, so thank you very much. I think these have been two good topics, and I've really learned a lot tonight. I think everyone has. This is Tony from Johnsonville Community Association. We meet the last Wednesday of each month. You're welcome to come along to the Johnsonville Community Centre, and from there, we'll just sign off until next time. Thank you very much.